This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity Business Podcast. We try and bring you daily short business episodes, short private equity episodes. We try and also make sure to an extent you learn something, you're entertained. We hope you enjoy it. Today we're going to discuss HP, Ford, Costco, and a lot more. So here's what's going on in the markets, the business world. Uh, HP, Hewlett Packard, jumped 5% yesterday. They're up about 17% year to date. Simply amazing. The thing that I find fascinating about the printer industry, and I think it's gotten worse and worse as my printer wasn't working this week, is that the cost of printers has gone down so much, but the cost of the ink cartridges has gone up so much. And again, that's because the model is they make the money through ink cartridges. I was really amazed. Some of the ink cartridges are more than $100 a piece. And some of the printers are literally about $100 a piece. And hitting that right balance, I'll probably end up buying a new Hewlett Packard, maybe this time a black and white printer for $200 to $300. But it is amazing the difference in cost between printers and cartridges. My printer's not working. The cost it would take me to figure it out versus buying a new one seems like I'll just end up buying a new one. But what a cluster. But again, in this environment, Hewlett Packard's doing really well. I do think that I look at the model like this, like the Kodak model and so forth, that at some point this model will become outdated, but it still seems to be working for Hewlett Packard. A different company we talk about often, Costco, continues to thrive. It's about 37% this year, 30% this year to date. It's about to report earnings. Overall, seems to be just doing terrific, really well-run company. Third thing we're talking about today is Ford and GM. They took it on the chin yesterday, each down about 5%. And I find this fascinating. Every consequence, every action by a politician has a reaction. The reaction you're seeing here is the U.S. talks about tariffs. The Biden administration continues the Trump tariffs. They seem to double down on them. And what this leads to is China, which is the second biggest market in the world, doubling down on their own tariffs. And this leads to less potential sales of Ford and GM vehicles. So the consequences, which are on a first level, seem exciting. More people buy Ford and GM. Workers get paid better here. Becomes very quickly on a second level. Cars become more expensive, and there's less overseas markets for us to sell to. Overall, trade wars are a bad thing. So we've talked about so far Hewlett Packard, Costco, Ford, and GM. I'll make a note on Trump Media and Technology Group. It was up 13% yesterday. Investing in these kinds of stocks, it reminds me more of gambling than investing. We'll see how that goes. A couple other notes there. John Paulson, famous investor, but also a Trump supporter, that he'll take his money out of the markets if Harris is elected. I'm not a fan of those kinds of big, broad statements. I guess it's better than the celebrities who say they'll leave the country if this or that candidate is elected. I always do hope that those celebrities will actually leave the country, but they never seem to do so. On that note, polls show that the race remains very close, with Kamala Harris ahead by approximately 2 to 3 points in most of the averages of the national polls. We keep on watching. We find it fascinating to watch this race and see what happens. Another note we'll say is that we're reminded that every time a politician talks and makes a proposal that sounds good on its face, that proposal often has absolutely awful second-level consequences that harm people versus help them. And the tariffs is a good example. This concept of capping credit card interest is another example. We saw this thing in New York City where they made it really hard to evict people in the intent to protect people. Of course, what it really meant is it made it really hard to rent an apartment without showing that you were already so wealthy you can afford the apartment, it would never be evicted. So all these political pandering efforts end up having vast consequences that are very negative. In any event, it's great to visit with you today on the Becker Private Equity Business Podcast. Always feel free to text Scott Becker at 773-766-5322 with your suggestions and ideas and topics. Thank you very much. And thank you to our wonderful producer, Chanel Bunger, for being with us today. Just the very best. Thank you very much.